All right, we are going to work on a little bit of a quiz review. It says geometry checkpoint quiz number 2, but like I said, I've kind of taken out all the important stuff, replaced them with other answers. So the quiz that we'll take after this will look pretty much exactly like this. We've got a picture. It's a little dark, but you can see it here. Whenever I see that I'm going to have a picture like this, I don't even like to look at the questions. I like to just look straight at the picture and make sure I know what's going on with the picture before I go any further. Okay? I see a big square. That's going to be a plane. And I see two lines. Okay? I see that the lines have a fancy lowercase n, so we could call this line n. I see that this line here has a fancy lowercase line m. So we have two lines. We have line n and we have line m. This one's a little hard to see, so maybe I'll just rewrite it. And these two lines, which one of them is stabbing through the plane? N or m? Line n is going through the plane. Okay? Line m is going on the plane. Okay? And the way I can tell that is this section right here, these slashed kind of like dotted lines. That is the way of saying like the line is underneath the plane in this point. It's like a visual cue. So line n is going through the plane. Okay? We did some examples of this. It's like you had a plane and you got a pencil that's stabbing through the plane. All right, we're good to go. Give two other names for plane SBT. There's only one plane, you know, the plane here. Anybody got a name for that? What do you got?
SPV.
Sure, we can just switch up the letters and that should work fine. I think the B is, oh, look at us. We're already getting started with a mistake. Sorry, Mr. Carter. I think the B is supposed to be a P. All right, just a little goof. Sure. So SPT, yeah. And I'm not even sure what you said. We say SVT. Is that what you said?
SPV.
SPV, sure. SPV. Remember, we're going to need 3 letters whenever we do a plane. We can also call it by the large capital letter that's in the corner, not near any plane, not near any points, and that would be
R.
it would be R. So remember, planes are always going to be capital with a little bit fancy letters. This one doesn't look that fancy. Points are always going to be capital, but if it's a line, it's going to be lowercase with a little bit fancy. So it's very picky. Number 2, give me 4 collinear points. I think if I look at SPT, there's only 3 on that whole line, so that's not going to work for me.
Oh, NPQO?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with O, Q, P, and capital N. This lowercase n can never be a point. Points are always capital. And so those can be my 4 collinear points. And here's just a general question that doesn't really have anything to do with this picture. What is the intersection of 2 planes? If you have 2 planes that intersect each other, what is their intersection like? So if you have, you know, a plane that's a big rectangle that looks like this, and then you have a plane that is another rectangle that looks like this, when those 2 planes intersect, they're going to intersect across the middle here, and so they're going to intersect at a line. Okay? 2 planes intersect at a line.
So 2 planes intersect at a line.
Mm-hmm. Bonus question. Where do 2 lines intersect? 2 lines would just intersect at a point, right? If you got 2 lines and they cross at a point. Easy peasy. Okay. Intersections, we talked about those. There's notes up on the Canvas course. You need to go back and check those out. There's a video up on YouTube. All right, a little bit more vocab, then we'll get into the algebra stuff. I'm sure we're all eagerly awaiting the algebra stuff. When naming array, you always begin with its blank. And we got a little word bank over here. We're always going to begin with its end point. Remember, array is this type of shape, and it's always going to have 2 points on it. And so if I call these A and B, we have to list the one that's at the end first. We could call this ray AB. Make sure that the one on the end comes first. All right, to blank a segment is to cut it into 2 congruent parts. Right, bisect, which is a little bit of a weird word that we don't use very often. It's kind of like the word dissect, right? If you think about you're in science class and you're going to have to dissect a frog, you're going to have to cut it up. So if you're going to bisect something, you're going to cut it in half. And lastly, a blank. There's only 2 options left, right? We've used bisect and endpoint. A blank is the middle of a segment. Of course, right? Never been a question easier in all of math than that. Okay, vocab. These first 6, we feel like we can handle these. Tomorrow when we take a quiz, there'll be very similar questions. Is there any part of this that's making you sweat, it's making you nervous? We doing okay? All right, now we're going to get into the more algebra style questions. A lot of these have X's. Remember, they don't have to have X's. I saw on some of our work, there were supposed to be some easy questions where instead of all this, it just said like 15 and 11. And I think the super basicness kind of scared some of us. Sometimes it's just easy numbers, we just got to add them up or something like that. But for these questions, let's make sure that we read the information. It says that point M is the midpoint. So we know for sure that M is the midpoint or the middle, of course. And if we know that M is the middle, what do we know about these 2 segments on both sides? They've got to be equal, right? If M is in the middle, that means this has to be the same with this. In other words, XM needs to be the same as MY. Because it's in the middle, okay? Now, we've done a lot of segment addition postulate stuff before. We talked about, if you get that the 2 parts equal the whole. This one's a little different. We don't have any information about the whole length. So how are we going to set up a little easy algebra formula to solve this question? Anybody got it? If you know for a fact, lunch is coming. If you know for a fact that this side is the same as this side, then the easy algebra equation that you set up is, you just put an equal sign, right? If the left is equal to the right, then you just write the left is equal to the right. Okay, I'll write it again just to make it super clear. 3x plus 5 equals 15 plus x. And as long as we've set up our equation, then Desmos should be able to do all the legwork for us. 3x plus 5 equals 15 plus x. And so what is the x value for this question going to be? 5. Now, before we move on, we've seen a couple of these questions where they have not been looking for x. Do they want x as our final answer? They want the length of xm. XM, is line segment XM the left, the right, or the whole thing? Just the left, right? XM is from X to M. How do we find the length of this left part? Yeah, we just plug in the X, okay? I'm going to go ahead and take 3X plus 5, and what number are we going to put into the X? A 5, and we could probably do this in our head. What's 3 times 5 plus 5? 20. I would agree with you. I would say that XM equals 20. Remember, if we don't put any lines on the top at all, that means the distance. So the way I wrote it here, XM, no lines, means the distance of XM, which is 20. So even though I didn't put a line on top, that's actually correct. Are we cool with this answer number 7?
Yeah.
Tomorrow, when you got the quiz and you've got the midpoint, you set them equal to each other, you type it in. If they want the X, you're going to be done, right? Look at number 8. It says find the value of X. So we're going to be done. We type it in Desmos, we're going to be done. But on number 7, when it says tell me the value or the length of segment XM, we need to go back and plug this 5 in. Just to show you this on Desmos, to be super thorough as a teacher, 3 times 5 plus 5 is 20. All right, number 8, I'll give you a little bit of a head start on me. Maybe just 20 seconds or so. Are you able to write down the simple equation that's going to help you out, and then type it in, and then get all the way to the answer? Just a little bit of extra time ahead of me. Did anybody get the answer for number 8? I got Frank's got it. Anybody else get it, or just Frank so far? Jason's got it. All right, we've got 3 answers. What'd you get, Frank? 1. Is that what you got?
Yes.
Is that what you got as well, Bree? 1? Okay, so we got a couple answers that all agree. Sounds good. Nice job, those of you that helped me out, raise your hand. And nice job if you didn't either. We know that A is the midpoint of line segment JC. I'm going to go ahead and draw it. If you're trying to do a line segment question and you're not going to draw it, you are just handicapping yourself for no reason. You might as well set yourself up. JC with A in the middle, it says JA, negative 2x plus 8. It says AC is 5x plus 1. And what is our final answer going to be? Just the x. Just the x, okay? We don't need to plug anything in. It just wants x. How do I set this up? If I know their midpoints, then I know they're equal. I want to make sure to point out that I did this for the last question too. But if you have these vertical slashes or horizontal, or sometimes they're called like hatches or hash marks, or there's a bunch of different words that work for these. But if you see these things, that means that you can trust they're the same. Set up my equation by just putting an equal sign right in the middle. There's never been an easier procedure than just slap an equal sign in there. Type it in, and I'm sure we're going to find the answer is 1, because I trust our classmates, especially since they all agreed. I'm getting 1. Looks good. Any questions on the front of the piece of paper? Okay, let's flip it over to the back. Now on the back, we're going to start incorporating what was mostly the last 2 things, distance and midpoint formula. The distance formula looks kind of crazy and has a couple different parts to it, but as long as we plug our numbers in easy, we're going to get the answer. The distance formula, I'm going to write it at the top, and I recommend that you write it down as well, is a lowercase d equals and a big square root. I always go a little bit further than I think. parentheses plus parentheses. Those parentheses have something inside them, minus signs, and there's one more thing we forgot, which is the squares on both parentheses. So I like to set myself up like this. Square root, parentheses, with squares, with minuses in there, and there's also a plus between them. Okay? That gives us 4 gaps to put numbers. And remember, it's going to be x minus x and y minus y. And the last thing, there's only one way you can mess up plugging in numbers. As long as you plug them in correctly, you could forget your negative sign or something. That would be a mistake. But whichever one you choose to go first, you have to make sure that that y value also goes first. So you have to kind of have your x-y pair. If the x goes first, then the y has to go first. So let's see this. Number 9. We got 1, 2, and 3, 4. I was feeling especially creative this morning, as you can tell. With 1, 2, and 3, 4, which one of these coordinates do you want to plug in first? I like to just pick one right from the start. Let's put 1, 2 in first. And if you want to be really crazy, pick 3, 4 first, and let's see if we get the same answer, right? Do a little experiment. That would be insane. Distance is a square root, a nice long square root. We're going to put in there parentheses squared plus parentheses squared. Make sure that we have minuses in the parentheses. And since I chose to do 1, 2 first, I'm going to put 1, 2 as my first 2 terms. The other one is 3, 4. 3, 4. Make sure my x values are grouped together. I see that my x values are together. I see that my y values are together. And also, if 1 goes first, 2 has to go first. This is looking perfect. I'm going to go to Desmos, get all this typed in. Square root, parentheses, 1 minus 3, parentheses, squared, plus, parentheses, 2 minus 4, parentheses, squared.
2.82.
I've typed these in. I got 2.82. It says round to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth is 2 decimals. So if we're going to rock with 2 decimals, that means I'm going to keep the 2.82, and I'm going to decide if I want to round this to up to a 3. Is this 2 going up to a 3? Yeah. Yes. Nice job. I really appreciate how locked in a lot of you are. 2.83. Did anybody switch and do 3, 4 as our first term? Did you get the same answer?
Let's go.
Nice. Welcome back. Make sure you catch up. The stuff you missed, you'll have to do on your own, as it will be graded for accuracy. All right. Number 9, not too bad. It was all small numbers. It was all positives. For number 10, I've given you some negatives, some zeros. So, type it in, write it down carefully. Nice long square root with a squared. Make sure that you put the minus in there. The most common mistake are these negative signs not quite appearing in the formula, so make sure they're in there. And now, again, I like to just pick one and call it first. Because when I pick one and call it first, I tend to get that part right every single time. Okay, what number do you want to put in this first gap? -2. And where do you want to go next? You want to go all the way over to the right parentheses, or do you want to just move across in order? Okay, so what goes next to the -2 minus, what did you say? 1. You're correct, Kevin. Nice job. And then after that, that's going to be squared plus parentheses. What goes in this first spot? 0, and what goes in this second spot? -5. So this is the part in particular that messes people up. That's pretty hard to see on my screen at least. This negative, which comes from the formula, and -5, which comes from the point, you have to have both of these negatives. That is where everybody makes their mistakes. Let's get this typed in Desmos. Somebody tell me the answer when you got it. 5.83. Is it really 8.3 again after the last question was also 8.3? Is that crazy? That must be just one of the craziest things you've ever seen. -2, 1. Math is just crazy, man. 5.83, I agree with you. You guys, excellent job. Now, when it comes to distances, you just get a decimal, that's it. You just write the decimal down. Obviously, you might have to do some rounding. Your distance should never be a negative number. I mean, you know you're way off if the distance between 2 points is a negative distance. Like that doesn't make any sense at all, right? There's no way the two houses can be -6 miles apart, right? They're always going to be a positive distance. So we should always be trusting that we're going to have a positive distance. For number 11, a couple people got a little stumped by this last week, I remember. How are we going to figure out the distance between G and H? We're going to have to figure out where those points are, right? So H and G are both coordinates, even though they don't give them to us. We're going to have to find them ourselves. Does anybody have either of these points figured out? I heard somebody say -2, -3. Is that G or H? That's G. -2, -3. Maybe please. And then so H, what's H? 0, 3. Nice job, right? Positive numbers means up, negative numbers means down in the Y direction. In the X direction, negative means left, positive means right. Okay, now that we have this, it's straight into the formula and we're going to be done. Okay? As crazy as the distance formula is, you just plug the numbers in, right? Don't mess up those negatives and you should be good. I'm going to type in H as my first point, but again, as long as you do your thing, we already did our experiment, it's going to work out. This one might be a little tricky. I got a double spooky setup with 2 negative sets up. And you know what? If this is 0.83, I might just lose my mind. All right, I've got 0 and a -2. And then for my Y's, I've got 3 and a -3. Can anybody confirm my answer? 6.32. Are we going up to 3.3? No, we are not. Remember, it's got to be at least a 5 to bump up. So since we have 3 to 4, 4 is not big enough. We are going to stay at 3.2. Final answer on my page right here, D, which is distance, equals 6.32. Another way to call this would just be capital GH is 6.32. Because if you have capital letters with no bar, that means distance. They're both the same. All right. Number 12 and 13 say find the midpoint. What is our midpoint formula? Midpoint is just talking about the middle, the in between, and it's a whole nother formula. So the distance between 2 points is talking about 6 miles from here to there, right? If I'm talking about what's the midpoint of your two houses, I need the point right in the middle between them. So it's
I use the regular formula, then I divide it by 2.
You use the distance formula and then you divide it by 2. Okay, so you're thinking 100% correct, right? So So here's what you got, okay? You've got 2 points, and you found the distance. Let's just say that the distance here was 10, okay? And when you cut 10 in half, what do you get? 5, right? So the distance from the end to the middle is 5. But that doesn't really tell us where that is, right? So if I said, hey, your house and my house is 10 miles apart, where's in between? And you just said 5. It's like, yeah, but where is that? And you're like, 5, man.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It's the right, like, all the math is good, but it's not the answer that we're looking for. Our answer needs to be coordinates. Okay? Some of this we could even think about. Dre, I got eyes just like Miss Bass has eyes, man. Put your phone away. So we need midpoint of these x's. What is the number between 3 and 9? Sometimes you can do it in your head, but most of the time I would not do it in your head because the formula is so easy, okay? You're going to take the two numbers, 3 plus 9, and then you're going to cut it in half. What's 3 plus 9 divided by 2? Monte's all over it. 6. Right? 3 plus 9 makes 12. You cut it in half, and you get 6. So you do the same thing for the y values. For the y value, add them up, cut them in half. Anybody got an answer for the y values? 6, right? 5 plus 7 divided by 2. 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. That's it. That's the whole thing. Okay? The midpoint formula, add the two numbers up, divided by 2. Do we have one person out already?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give one another time. So I'll give you some time. Try to find that midpoint for number 13. Just add those numbers up and divide by 2. Of course, you can use Desmos. If you're using Desmos, I recommend you press divide first before you type in any numbers.
Teachers, y'all don't mind? Can I make a pass when somebody get ready?
We certainly don't mind. If people are back, we can only have 2 at a time, so we got 2 right now, but yeah.
Can you get a decimal?
Can you get a decimal? You're pretty much, the only decimal that's going to be cool is a 0.5,
Yeah.
right? If you're working with a 0.5, then that's probably cool. If you're getting a 0.83, that's not what we're looking for. What'd you say? Yeah. If you're starting off with no decimals, then the only possible decimal you can end up with is a 0.5. So, did anybody get the x value for number 13? I heard negative 3.5. If you take negative 2 and you take negative 5 and you add them up and divide by 2, I agree with you. Negative 3.5 is going to be our midpoint. You know, notice I'm taking my x value and my x value to give me my x value. I'm not mixing x and y's when you're talking about midpoint or distance. Right. Okay. So if I'm going to use the other formula, I'm going to choose this y and this y. Add them up, divide by 2 is going to give me this y. Okay, so my y value is going to be negative 1 added with 3 divided by 2. Did anybody get the y value? 1 is correct. Again, just to show you on Desmos, fraction first, negative 1 plus 3 on top of 2, 1. So the midpoint formula has got to be easier than the distance formula. There's no square roots, there's no squares, there's no negatives that come with the formula. But the midpoint can be involved in some pretty complicated questions, okay? We did a worksheet like this where finding the midpoint is easy. add them up, divide by 2. But there's this tricky kind of question right here where they give you the endpoint and the middle, and you're supposed to reach out and find the endpoint. Okay, these are a little tricky. Let's see if we have one of those on our review here. Okay, if M is the midpoint of XY, all right, I'm always going to draw myself a little picture because it takes 10 seconds. It helps me out. So M is the midpoint of X, Y. Find the coordinates of X. So that tells me that X is a mystery. I don't know what X is. M is my point here, 5, 2, and Y is my point here of 9, -4. Okay? These are, for sure, the most thinking that you're going to have to do on this whole quiz, right? The vocab, you either know it or you don't, right? The midpoint stuff we did on the front, you just literally slap an equal sign in it and type it in a Desmos, okay? Over here, you just plug the numbers in. Midpoint formula, you just plug the numbers in. These are the thinker questions, okay? We have the midpoint, we have the end, we're missing X. I can even put these little slashes or hashes to really make it clear that these are equal segments, because M is the midpoint. Okay. If we're talking about this and we're using the midpoint, we're going to use the midpoint formula. Okay? And our midpoint formula is add them up and divide by 2. This is our midpoint formula. Okay? And when you add them up, you should get the midpoint. So, here's how we want to think about it. The midpoint formula. We should be taking point X and adding it with point Y, and that should be equaling point M. That's what the midpoint formula means. You take the left and the right, add them up, divide by 2, and you should get the M. Now, typically, we know X, we know Y, we don't know M. But for this question, M is something that we do know. So we're going to take this little formula here, and we're going to plug the numbers in. X. Do we know what the X is? No. We don't know what the X is. So this is talking about point X, which is right here. Do we know anything about this? No, we do not. So we're just going to leave that as an X. I don't know what that needs to be. Y. Do we know the X value of the Y endpoint? We do know that. It is 9. And when we take the left, is that supposed to be a 9?
Oh, no, it's supposed to be -4, right?
Okay, so you guys, I like how you're thinking. We've been tricked by the letters of the question being kind of weird. Okay? So we have point X and we have point Y. These have nothing to do with the X values or the Y values. Okay? When we're trying to find our missing information of X, okay, do you want to try to find the X number first or the Y number first?
The X number.
Okay, if we're going to try to find this X number, then we do not care about any Y values for the whole remainder of this
So,
search.
Mr. Colley, when you put Y over 9, right, you see where it's in parentheses?
Mm-hmm.
Do that mean like...
So I see what you're saying. This is supposed to be point Y X value. You see what I'm saying?
Alright. Oh, I see now.
It's maybe that I could have been more clear about that. If we're in the world of x's, I remember when I taught you guys this, I was kind of doing a box like this, right? We're in the x world right now. So point x has an x value of, I don't know. Point y has an x value of 9. And then point, how are you?
She doesn't need, she needs back and get a full escort, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Welcome back. So, if we are in x world, talking about point x, the x value is x, point y, the x value is 9. And what is the x value of m? 5. Because we know that. This is what we don't know. We don't know this value. Again, it's a little bit of a thinker's question. And honestly, number 15 is going to be easier. Well, 15 is a whole different question. Whatever. I don't think 14 is that hard. I think just the fact that the x and y is literally the same letters as x's and y's, that it kind of messed us up. What's up?
Could you explain again how you got 5?
Yes. So, one last time, let me just do this. Okay? Let me take you off to a whole different world where we're going to do another question, and we're going to do it so fast, and it's going to be so easy. Let's use totally different letters, all right? We got R, S, T. Oh, I'm so sorry. I already had, my brain was just working its one way. Let's say that R is at 1, 2, and the S is at 3, 4. Right? Again.
I know they all essays all closed.
You got to get them right. Obviously, the principals are out there, man. They're doing their thing. So, if we're just doing this question real quick, we're missing what T is. Okay? Our midpoint formula. Let's find the X first. It says add them up, divide by 2, and that should equal the midpoint. Right? So, what we should have here is add up the two ends, and you should get the middle. So if I'm going to add up the ends and get the middle, add up the left, and I don't know what that is, and I should get the middle.
Ms. Bass, can I do upstairs too?
You see where this 3 is coming from?
Yeah.
Add up the two ends, divided by 2, you should get the middle. So that's, I know the end, I don't know the end, divided by 2, and I get the middle. That's where my 5 is coming from. Add up the ends, and you should get the middle. Here's my 5, coming from the middle. All right, let's wrap this up. We're almost done. Lunch is right around the corner. When we type this in, parentheses, fraction, plus on top, divided by 2. When we add them up, that's going to be x and 9. We should get the middle, which is 5.
Real quick.
What's up?
If you think about it, we don't really have to do any of it. Like, you can just grab it from the question.
Oh, you did?
What'd you say, Jace?
If you think about it, you don't even have to do any of it. You could just grab the missing one from the equation. Like, how we got the 5, it was already there.
Right. That is what we did. And so the end point is 1. I think we might have stalled so long that we're really kind of losing it for this question. So, doing the y values, okay, not all that hard. We're going to start off. Add them up, divide by 2 is equal to the middle, okay? What is the y value of point x? I don't know, right? Point x is a mystery. I don't know what it is. So, I'm going to leave it as a y. Everything else should get a number now. Everything else should get a number. What is the y value of the other side? This one is -4. And just like you said, Jace, what is the middle y value going to be? 2. The left and the right, add them up, divide by 2, you get the middle. Now we go to Desmos, we type this in, we'll be done.
So, Ms. Carter, in reality, we don't really have to write any of this down. You could just grab your answers from the equation.
Well,
Except if you have to show one.
The problem is that this number for x, we don't have any numbers for x. And so when we get this, which is an 8, that number 8 is not coming from anywhere else. It's coming straight from Desmos. Okay?
So you do have to do work.
Yeah. Trust me, I wouldn't be giving you problems if they were a waste of your time. All right, last question here. I think we're pretty much, we've already even gone over this type of question. I'm going to draw a picture. Drawing pictures is what I do best. Maybe not. Maybe it's the worst thing I do, but R is the midpoint of QS. QR is going to be 9x minus 25. RS is going to be negative 13x plus 41. Got some bigger numbers here. I know that R is the midpoint. I can put these slashes to remind me that they're equal. And if your two segments are equal, what can you do? You can just put an equal sign in the middle. All right, so we've got our left and our right with the equal sign in the middle. We're going to Desmos. Desmos is doing a lot of hard work for us. Can you even imagine the kids in the past who had to do all this by hand?
Well, the teacher I switched from here, she said we weren't even allowed to use Desmos.
Yeah, well, listen, we're making it happen in this class. So, what is our x value? I typed it all in. I'm getting the x value of x equals 3. But because this is a graded classwork for accuracy, give me another 1 minute. I know we're getting a little restless. We've been working on this assignment for a while. 3 is not the correct answer. I'll tell you right now. When I get your paper and I go to grade it at lunchtime, the first thing I'm going to look at is number 15, because this is wrong. This is not it, okay? So far, our work is looking good, but the answer needs to be QS. What is QS? Look at your picture. What QS means what? The whole thing from Q all the way to S. And because there's no bar, we're talking about the distance. How do I find the distance of the whole thing? Plug in the x to what? So you got a couple different options, right? These are supposed to be the same thing, right? So if I plug an x over to the left, and I plug the x over to the right, what am I going to get? Same thing, right? They're the same thing. Let's put the x over here into the left, okay? That would be 9 times x minus 25, and the x number is 3. And what's 9 times 3?
27.
Minus 25?
2.
2. So what I just found out is that QR, the left half, is equal to 2. Now, Zay, let me ask you this. Do I need to go figure out what RC is? Because it's the same thing, right? It's the midpoint. It's the same on both. RS is also going to be 2 because it's the middle. So what is QS going to be?
It has to be 4.
It has to be 4. And I can write it like this. Capital letters with no bar means distance. We're good to go. All right, this is coming up. This is basically like a nice little review of the whole first unit. Some vocab, some midpoint. I think really number 14 is the big one.